How's everyone tonight? Great. Understand you have a business plan competition ahead of you? Correct. What kinds of businesses are you thinking of writing about, talking about? Starting. Here's some topics. Yes.
We've got a pickup and delivery laundry service.
Okay.
Putting together through one of the entrepreneurial process.
Okay.
And I know there's another group that's doing an app, Gapper, where they announce things in a proximity. We've also got some other guys working on a concept for a social golf application for Google Glasses.
Okay. Maybe I could be good at that kind of golf when I'm doing it.
Yeah, right?
Okay, good. So, well, what we're going to talk about tonight, we'll hopefully get a lot of your feedback. There's some more pizza here, by the way, if you want. So, the voice of the customers might be a term you've heard before. It's really, in essence, an attempt from business leaders to understand what their customer wants. It's really not that complicated of a concept, but doing it is pretty difficult. So, we talk about marketing research, or sometimes you hear the term marketing intelligence. There's another term of business intelligence. Now we can hear that term from a mixture of terms. Your perception of marketing research or marketing intelligence is something that is easy to do, hard to do, medium to do, cheap to do, expensive to do, what? Should be done, not need to be done, what?
I think it's expensive sometimes.
Sorry? Can't, okay, expensive. Okay, good. What else?
Important.
Sorry?
Important to do.
Important to do, because most people say it's important, so why don't a lot of companies do it?
They feel like they already know it.
Okay, so there's a bit of an ego there. I know my business, so it's going to sell. It's a great product. I know that. That's one reason. Another reason?
They don't know how.
Don't know how. Okay, two more major reasons. Time. What's the time? We don't have time to spend a year understanding the voice of the customer, what people want. We've got to get in the marketplace now because someone else is going to come and beat us to the punch, right? It's a legitimate concern. And the last reason, which is often one of the biggies, it can be very expensive to do it right. So the can budget fix time? Got a big enough budget, you can kind of compress the time frame. If you need to do surveys, focus groups, interviews, you can do them quickly if you've got the funds. So the funding piece is really often a key driver. Also, sometimes business leaders don't necessarily think they need to do it, or they might feel we don't really have time or ability to do it. We'll just try to start a business to see how it goes. So you might think about major companies that have had some marketing research failures. Anyone have an example they want to share of a company that has something that failed in the marketplace?
Infinity, of course, came out.
Infinity? Okay, what about it?
They just showed pictures of skies and trees and clouds. They didn't show the car.
They show the car. Okay. So in that case, the message sort of overwhelmed the product. People might have remembered the commercial in terms of the visuals, but not sure what it was about. Yeah, absolutely. What else?
New Coke.
The fiasco of New Coke. All right, moving on. Bless their hearts. But yes, that was a disaster. Yes?
Recent Blackberries.
Blackberry, what about Blackberries?
The new phones that they've come out with just haven't sold.
Okay, they're just not what people expected. At least when they did a market test, as opposed to lab environmental testing, they might have come up with a lot of different things that they didn't really necessarily expect the market or the field test to really uncover. What else? Another example. So, who knows what Gerber's baby food is? Who knows this product? Who knows this product? Really good product? Think it sells?
Yes.
Babies like it, I presume?
Yes.
So here's a problem Gerber's facing. They've got a product they sell to baby food, and multiple kinds of flavors and whatnot. To try to get the product additional sales, increase their market size, it's difficult to do that if you don't have an alternate use for the product. You might come up with some other use for it, and then you can go into a different market. The problem with that product is it's really kind of one use, right? You're not going to sell it really to adults to eat. You sell it to adults to buy for babies. The problem is there's a limited baby market, so to speak, in this country. It's not going to grow growing exponentially. They can't really do anything to increase that market. It's just kind of baby number. It's so saturated. Babies are buying it. needing it, so that's kind of it. So what's the other option if you're trying to expand from a marketing perspective, you're trying to expand the product? Market saturates, you're going to do what? Great product, but market saturate. What are you going to do? What's another option? Take the product somewhere else where it's not saturated. So they said, well, we'll do that. We'll go international. So they decided to go, I went to Asia, Africa, India, Asia there, part of Asia, of course, but Africa primarily was one of the first forays. Why? Because there are a lot of babies. It's not. It's a lot of babies. And India, there are, a lot of babies. So they figured that's a great market. Babies like it. They'll eat it. So they sent the product, tested product in the U.S., wonderful product, sent it over to India and Africa, and it failed initially. Why? They didn't do it. They didn't do voice of the customer. They didn't understand what the customer wanted. Who's the customer? The baby? No, the parent, right? So they're the what failure did they encounter? Why do you think they failed at first? And they re-engineered it, and they're okay. Why do you think they failed at first?
Wasn't it the labeling?
A labeling problem. What was about the labeling problem? Something as simple as...
They thought there was babies inside instead of understanding there's food.
Yeah, in some cultures, what's on the label is what's in the package. That's just the way they do packaging. You see, in some cultures where there's not great literacy, that's how they convey what the contents of the product. So they don't know that. They didn't do the research to see that's not what we really convey in this market. So they said, put them on the shelves, and what do people think? Obviously they did not know, they did not think that the baby it was part of the product, but that was off-putting enough that they're winning. So sales did not move as quickly as they thought. That change of labeling, simple issues like that. They had understood what the customer wants first. They could have avoided a lot of it. There's a whole list of major companies who waste a lot of time and lose market share because they don't understand what the customer wants, because they may presume it already, or maybe they don't want to spend the money, or they think the product is good enough, it'll overcome problems in the marketplace. There's a lot of things you can do to understand what is now being called the many surface, a voice of the customer. Generally speaking, you're going to go put together a business plan, which is what you guys are doing, right? Why do you put together a business plan? The two major reasons why you can put together a business plan. What are the two major reasons why you can put together a business plan? You're doing it, right? So why are you doing it?
See what your market is.
Okay, you're perhaps looking for investors or funding or something like that. Put together a business plan. If you're going to go to a bank or in a competition like this, they're not going to say, here's the money, we love your idea. You got to write it down. This is what we're doing. Or use business plan as an internal kind of strategic document. Maybe you're a company that's been operational for a number of years. You're like, well, the business is kind of running us. Maybe we should write a business plan to figure out where we should be going from here. So often it's an internal kind of strategic sort of document, which is useful. But in many cases, it's to start a business and get funding. I used to live out in New Mexico. Who's been in New Mexico? Yeah? What part? Albuquerque. They have bumper stickers for New Mexico. Says not new, not Mexico. It's true. But I used to run the business development office there out of the University of New Mexico. We did a lot of business plans, I don't know, over the years, over 4 or 5 years I was out there. There were dozens and dozens of business plans for folks who wanted to go to the bank and get loans. So I would ask them, well, this product looks kind of interesting, or your service looks kind of interesting, but who's your customers? First I ask them, don't they start a business plan? And they're like, what's that? So we get them up on speed on that. Then we ask them, who are your customers? Who's going to buy your product and why? It's not just, well, it's a great product in my mind, or I like it, my friends like it, my buddies say I should start the business, that's great, but who's actually going to buy the product? Because remember, when you have an idea in your head, generally speaking, what fascinates you only interests others. And you better make sure that you have it conveyed in a way that makes sense to the folks who show the value. And how you're going to show the value is to show that they're customers. Because if you're going to get money from a bank, or from a lender, or from an investor of some sort, to give money for your business, what do they want out of your business? If I lend you $1 million for a business, what do I want as a lender, investor?
Profit.
Oh, and money back plus a profit, right? So I'm really concerned that you can, of course, collateralizing the loan is a big issue, but I'm really concerned that you can have the cash flow pay back. So that's going to be driven by, do I have the customers? It's not enough that it's just a good product. Do I have the customers? So looking at understanding the voice of the customer, so if you can go to a lender, or in this case, your competition, and say, we know it's going to be successful, at least we have a lot of research to show that we think it's going to be successful, that's going a long way to showing that you've actually thought about what you need to do to sell this product or service. So my contact information, by the way, is here on the first and last slide. I believe you guys can post the slides or send them out if you'd like. There are a number of slides. I'm not going to get through all of them. It's a 30 slide deck, but I'm going to hit on key points, and the rest of it really is there for you guys to take a look at. I'm happy to have a conversation with any of you guys on your efforts. So, looking at the difference here between secondary and primary, you need to lay out the plan. Secondary and primary data piece. The secondary data piece really is the foundational piece of the whole effort. If I'm going to send you guys into an interview, you're going to interview, the president of Exxon, which is primary research, qualitative, in the form of an IDI, an individual depth interview. So if you're going to go do an interview, or you're going to do a focus group, which is a larger set of folks, or you do a survey, which is even bigger, it's kind of progressive, you have to do the secondary data first. If I say you're going to interview the president of Exxon, you know how to prepare for that? What are you going to do to prepare? You're just going to go into and start interviewing the president of Exxon? Because the interview is not just asking questions. That's easy. You can send them a list of questions in email. An interview is a conversation. It's not just, here's some things I want you to answer. We'll just send it to them. Why do I have to sit down? So really the interview process really depends on the quality, not really the questions. I mean, that's obviously very, very important, but really the quality of the follow-ups. You're not going to be able to have that kind of conversation unless you've done a significant amount of secondary background research or homework on the topic at hand. You need to do that. So you talk about your product or service, looking at things like the market, area, size, and share is very important. What's the difference between the market area, size, and share? If you're going to a lender and you can't map out, here's the market area, size, and share, they're going to go, well, how do I know you're going to be successful? How do you have any data behind what you're talking about? So the secondary data will help you identify the market area, size, and share. So if you talk about, that's pizza here. Look, it's Pop John's. This is very difficult standing right here. this is a testament to willpower. So if you're talking about pizza, and you're starting a new pizza delivery place here on G Street or whatever, market area, size, and share. What do those three things mean? What do those three things mean? Market area is what? What do we presume that to be?
Food.
Sorry? Food? We got pizza. You're going to sell pizza. You have a list of products. So the bank says, well, what's your market area?
Maybe like the 20 or 30 square blocks in this area.
Okay, so basically the market area is a physical space that you expect to draw customers from. You're not going to draw customers from Richmond to come get your pizza, by and large. There could be onesies and twosies, you might be in town or whatever. But generally speaking, the bulk of your business is going to be from X radius. So that's the market area. So the market area is X square blocks, square miles, or this many blocks. Of course, it's dependent upon what? That's a big driver in understanding that. It's 2 block. What if you got 15 pizza places 8 blocks away from here? You're obviously not going to have that level of reach. So you have to look at the competition. You have to know who you're up against. So market area is a physical size, X square miles or blocks, or the East Coast or Australia, whatever it is, depending on your product. Then the market, that's market area. Market area is physical space. Market size is really driven by 2 things: the number of potential customers and the dollar value of the market. So the market size might be $3 million, or could be 55 customers. And customers are typically broken into major categories like business customers or individual customers, maybe university customers categories. So you need to look at the market size. So market size might be X number of customers, 55 business clients, $62 million in that area people spend on pizza. This is why you have to decide what the area is first in order to determine what the size of that is. Now you're starting to develop an argument for whether your business can fit in there and make some money. Then the last piece is the share. The share is your what about the market size?
Percentage.
What you think your percentage is going to be. Here's a market area is 5 square miles, and in that square miles are this many folks who are competitors. This is how we differentiate yourself about competitors, and I would not use editorial comments about your competitors, just simply use factual information about them. Here's the market area. In that market area, here's the market size. This many millions of dollars, this many possible customers, and then we think we're going to get X% of that. Okay. How do we know that? Well, we've talked to the customers to figure out we think this is where we're headed in terms of the type of customers, how many we're going to expect. One of the challenges with doing research like this, it's predictive in a sense. You don't know. You're talking about what you think is going to happen ahead of time. You don't know. Could be right, could be wrong. But at least you have some data behind what you're talking about. So to start the case and to build your argument, the secondary data piece is critical. You need to make sure you have that in place and you sort of visualize what the market size and market area size of share is that you think is going to be your segment. Okay. Qual versus quant. The qualitative are typically things like focus groups, interviews, a lot of secondary data. Observation is typically qualitative, although observation can be some quantitative, which I'll get to a bit later. Quantitative piece, you can have secondary data that's quantitative if it's statistical and numerical. Typically, experiments are often quantitative. Some observation can be quantitative, like mechanical observation can be quantitative. And primarily surveys. All this is a more quantitative kind of data. So typically you want to start with qualitative, build a case, then move into quantitative, and then close with an analysis of the two, essentially. This is sort of a descriptive piece is what we found. The analytic piece is what do we do about it? Two totally different cases you have to make. So you don't want to only limit yourself to descriptive. We found people said this. Okay, great. Well, what is a manager going to then ask you? You say, well, we found all this information about your customers. What is a manager going to ask?
How many?
Or how many? Or what about? They're going to say what? This is what our customers think about XYZ. And they're going to give you two dreaded words. Okay, so what are the two dreaded words? So what? Often when you give just descriptive data, management or a lender, it's just going to, well, so what? That's interesting. I'm happy for you. Well, now what? The so what piece is answered when you get to the analytic piece, when you say, oh, based on all the descriptive data, here's what you should do with it. Take this following course of action, because you have some understanding of what the audience wants. How many of you have taken out marketing classes? Regular marketing? Okay. Okay. So looking at your secondary data, then we've got multiple sources, and you can just read those. I'm not going to go through them all, but you've got multiple secondary sources. The key with secondary data is to understand the source and be able to describe whether or not the source makes sense. Is it correct? Do you trust the source? If someone says, where did you get that information? Oh, I read it online. I got it from a magazine. Well, how do I know that's any good? Oh, I read it online. How do you know it's any good? If you can't defend the source, if you can't walk it back, the whole thing starts to come unravel. Obviously, if you pick things like journals or articles or organizations that are already highly known and highly vetted, you know, the American Journal of Pediatrics or something, when not many people are necessarily going to question it, they know what that is, they know it has some level of integrity. It's not just some article you read somewhere. You need to make sure that you've decided that I can defend the secondary data, because in many cases, when you put secondary data on the screen, people are going to ask, where'd you get it? And you need to be able to say, it's good. And they're going to ask you one of these 6 things. They might not ask them like this, but they're going to ask you something that falls in these categories. So when you talk about, we understand our customer, because we read in secondary data that customers want the product to be blue, and we believe that women over 30 are our primary market segment. They're buying more of these products than anybody else. And this is a reasonable price point because you read it in secondary data. Great. You're saying that you understand the voice of the customer based on what other people have said. And that's useful. But you need to ultimately build a case of what you know from primary research, what you've actually spoken to customers. So the secondary data is the foundational piece. You move to the primary methods next. So I found all this information. Well, great. And there are various pros and cons to each type, but suffice it to say that you're going to be asked some question related to these issues. They might not ask you, is it relevant? Is it timely? They might ask you questions around that you can piece together and go, this is what they're really asking. So when we talk about secondary data that is, that's the relevance issue. You might think we're doing our pizza deal, and we said, we've read about other pizza companies that started in Pocatello, Idaho, and this is how they were successful. We're going to replicate it here. And someone might go, well, there might be actually good secondary data, correct secondary data, but perhaps it's out of date, for one thing, so maybe it's not that useful. So you got to look at the date on things. But it might not be fully relevant. Like, yeah, that's true for Pocatello, Idaho, but their circumstances are very different from our circumstances, so it's not really truly relevant to take that data and the conclusions and then put it on top of our conclusions. It doesn't really equate. It's not fully relevant. So be careful about the relevance issue. The accuracy issue is really important. If you start quoting other people's data, well, I read a survey that 63% of people want a new pizza joint in the city. Therefore, that's the customer, right? Who did that survey? I don't know. Okay. That's a red flag. If you do know, it could be an organization that has some biases to it, conceivably. Or perhaps the way they did the survey wasn't very good. Maybe they only asked 50 people. And perhaps they asked 50 people from a part of the city where there's really no pizza places. And actually, in this part of the city, there are 2 or 3 already. So the accuracy of that source data is in question. You need to make sure you have that issue squared away. So consider the source is the issue here. Sufficiency isn't enough. I'm making a case for the pizza place based on 2 or 3 articles, particularly if they have any issues with these other categories. 2 or 3 articles is probably not enough. You need to have a little more information than just that tiny amount of data. The last one here, completeness. What do you think that means? Completeness. Complete. What do you think about completeness? This is a huge offender. When you go, if you want to go get an article, and you're reading a journal article, and you've got some data from the journal, and you pull it out, and you put it in the paper, and it's just exactly right. Boy, this is a home run for what I'm trying to do. It's exactly what I need to do. That problem with that journal article is you're pulling out some pieces of it, but you typically would pull it from where? The article itself, or sometimes an abstract of the article, right? Sometimes you go to the abstract, sometimes the article is so perhaps written in a way like, I don't know what the heck I'm trying to say. And then we read the abstract, from there I'll take data, and now you're 2 steps removed from the source. So it might not be fully telling the whole story, even though it could be an accurate quote, but it might not really fully be conveying what is meant by the source of the article. If you've gone to a movie, presume you've all gone to a movie, and you want the movie that's coming out you're dying to see, what's the next movie you're dying to see that's coming out?
On Wall Street.
Wall Street one? So you watch trailers, you see the movie trailers, and what do you think about these trailers? My God, it's a cool movie. I can't wait to see it. And then you go to the movie and you think, what? Boy, it's not about the trailer at all. The trailer really kind of built me up. Or you watch the interview of the century. You know, Barbara Walters gets who's the next person they want to interview? Snow, this guy, right? Let's say she lands an interview. You get Barbara, they bring her out, I'll take her over to, where is he, Russia? And then they, bring her in and she does the interview of the century. And so she's asking questions. And they show snippets. And they show her looking really earnest, asking a question. They show his answer. And it's the explosive interview of the year. And they show it on Friday night at 10 or whatever. So then you watch it. He did not say that. I can't believe he said that in that interview. I'm going to watch that interview. So you watch the interview and you think, what? Did he say what was put in the ad? Yeah, we're not going to totally make up what he said. He said it. But if you look at, watch the hour-long interviews with, with Barbara Walters, based on what she was asking, the way she was asking it, and the context of what he said before and after that explosive statement, what he said was really not that unreasonable, and I might have said the same thing. So by pulling out that quote, it's really not telling the complete story. So you got to be very careful in secondary data to say that we've got, this is what we read. That might be true, but you're going to have some joker in the back of the audience raise their hand and go, I read that article, and that's a correct quote, but it's not meaning what you're talking about. It's taken out of context. Be very careful with the completeness piece of the puzzle. Okay. Secondary data, don't shortchange the secondary data. A lot of good sources you can get secondary data from. Census.gov, BLS, or data.gov now is a huge source of lots of government statistics on employment issues, economic issues, income issues. There's a lot of data associated with data.gov. So take a look at that as a good source of data. There are also a number of research companies that are what they call syndicated companies that they sell information. If you want to know about, sea turtles in, Florida, or sea turtles in Florida, wherever, you can find someone who's done that research and will sell that to you. So there are syndicated companies that can do that. And generally, if they're big companies, they've done a pretty thorough job of research. That's why they're in business. So you can use them as kind of a source as well. So don't shortchange the secondary data piece. Getting into the primary data piece, so a lot of methods with primary data. IDIs, individual depth interviews, is a big one. The next often step is, and it could be done on board, it's just not any magic to it, but often you would go from an IDI or a series of IDIs to a focus group, and then from a focus group, maybe to a survey, something like that. So survey is typically your last stop in terms of major data collection, because IDIs, which are 30-minute, up to 30-minute interviews, 20, 30-minute interviews of subject matter experts, people you have targeted, who know something about your topic. American Restaurant Association, the American Association for Pizza Delivery, businesses, or whatever it is. You've interviewed somebody who's a subject matter expert, and now you have information from the secondary data you can bring in. I understand this is what we think, based on our secondary data, what customers want. This is what we're reading about the marketplace. And you ask IDI, individual depth interview folks, does this make sense? Am I right? Am I wrong? What am I missing? What other sources should I check? Who else should I interview? Using them as a subject matter expert, qualitative, but you come to the table with some specific questions, but also with a lot of good follow-up questions. So the IDIs are people you target. We've talked to 5, 10 people who are experts, and we're going to use their expertise to validate what we found in secondary data and build on it for the next phase, which is a larger actual discussion with customers in a focus group setting. So by the time we get to that focus group setting, we already have secondary data IDI work, so we're sitting there in a room fairly well versed up on this topic to have this conversation with potential customers. So IDIs, again, these are targeted people, like the focus group are targeted people. They're not random. You're not picking random people for an IDI or focus group. You're picking folks who are targeted, who are specifically knowledgeable. A focus group and an IDI are not intended to tell you what your customers think. What do you think of that statement? An IDI and then a focus group, which is a bigger group of about 8 to 12 people. We're going to test all these things you've learned in the secondary data and the IDIs. We're going to test them in a focus group setting of targeted people. Generally, an IDI and a focus group is not going to design to tell you what your audience thinks. What do you think of that? What do you think they're actually designed to tell you? Up close, since you know another word in there, and we'll have it.
How they react.
Okay, how they react? What else? What about what they're thinking? Is that you're supposed to figure out what customers want in an IDI focus group? It gives you an idea of what they might be thinking. It's too small sample size to tell you what the customers writ large are thinking. That's more of the survey piece. So if IDIs and focus groups are designed to tell you, people say, well, a focus group well, and the products failed. Well, that's because you have one focus group, and say, well, Hispanic men didn't like our product. Because you had one guy in the focus group. That guy doesn't represent all Hispanic men. So focus groups should not be overused to represent the population. It certainly is too small. Obviously, if you do 20 focus groups, then you start having a large sample. But still, focus groups and IDIs are designed to tell you what people might be thinking based on what we learned in secondary. Now we're crystallizing what we think are really the issues with the customer, figuring out what we're right, what we're wrong, and then from that, we take that data, put it on a questionnaire, and that's designed to be a large-scale, statistically representative sample of the population, and that is supposed to tell you what the audience thinks within a margin of error. That's the jump. So be careful to not overuse focus groups or IDIs. But focus groups are very useful. There are a couple of sites here you can check out. You can Google videos of focus groups. The challenge there is a lot of times you can't find a whole focus group because it's usually proprietary information, but you can see some snippets that could be useful. But a focus group is really a controlled brainstorming session controlled by the moderator. For what purpose? What are you trying to get out of a focus group? You've heard this term, right? You have about 8 to 12 people. There's a nice sweet spot of conversation. Fewer than that's really not a focus group. A large group of this is not a focus group. You really need to have it's only one conversation going on. So why?
To understand what whoever the people that focus group represent, usually you gather everyone who's like mothers of this age or whatever, and see what do people like you think. So you're trying to kind of get an architect going by talking to a bunch of people with a similar.
Okay. And remember, often by the time you get to a focus group, this might be your third stop. We've done secondary data, we've done some IDIs, now we're focus group. Now we can talk about, well, our secondary data and our IDIs reveal this about you guys, because now you're the customer. Is that right or wrong, or how do you react to that? What are we missing? And it's your opportunity to kind of, from a clearinghouse perspective, sort out the issues. Because when you get to the next phase of survey, you're stuck with those questions. If you ask a bad set of questions, it's too late. You can't pull them out. IDIs and focus groups, it's more of a conversation. So you can work out, oh, we're not ranking it. What language should we use? What words should we use that convey more appropriately to our audience? Yes.
So would product testing be different than focus group? Like, would you bring it like?
Right, yes, you would do that in many cases. Projective techniques are things that folks can use to do this. You get people up and active in a focus group setting. So in a typical focus group, which will last roughly 2 hours, you go in prepared with a moderator guide as the person managing it. And there's just some general ideas of moderator guides. And moderator guides are not, they're somewhat detailed, but they generally have 5 or 6 sections that you have timed. And each section has sub-questions that you want to get out of it. You're not just going to go start talking about the questions. Let's talk about your use of dishwashing detergent. Go. And it's too open-ended. You need to go in there with a series of themes. Now these themes cannot be answered typically in one question. There are lots of questions would sort of answer the question of perceptions or beliefs or lifestyle. If I ask you, what's your lifestyle? Are you going to ask me such a question? What are you going to ask me? If I want to find out the lifestyle of a customer, I'm not going to say, what's your lifestyle? I'm asking what?
How often do you go to the gym?
Gym. You have to remind me of this pizza here.
Drink.
Yeah. Do you drink? Cook. You want to go, all expenses, paid vacation. Where do you want to go? What do your friends do? What kind of movies do you like? What kind of books do you read? I'm asking all these little ignored questions. I'm actually building a profile of this person's lifestyle, and they don't even know it. I'm not asking, what's your lifestyle? That puts them off a little bit off guard too as well. I'm asking them specific ignored kinds of questions, onesies and twosies that are easy for them to answer, that will build a composite of this one broad issue. So a moderator guide are just broad, this is just a list I ginned up, but they're broad issues. Now under each one you have a bunch of little questions that answer that broad issue. So you can now, in the conclusion of the focus group, you can thread together the themes. And if something out we can put on a questionnaire that's a little more precise than just what we found in IDIs and secondary data. That's not really enough. So back to the projective techniques, yes, using things like taste tests, what they call photo sorts, generically photo sorts. Could be we have 3 or 4 ads on a screen. Which one do you like the best? Maybe give some parameters. We're looking for the one that's the most appealing to least appealing. Put them in order. You can even have one of your teammates manage that. Hand out a sheet of paper and with the A, B, C, D, whatever. Have circle which one's the first, second, third, fourth, most appealing, most upscale, least expensive looking, whatever it's most fun, whatever you're trying to measure. Collect them, sort them out, and then have discussion. Well, nobody put this one as number 1. Why not? And that will help bring the data you give us back against into the crowd, so to speak, into the audience, to get that data to have the discussion, to keep the discussion moving. So things like that. So taste tests are good. I mean, any kind of tangible thing you can have them do. Trying a product, is this too heavy, too light, too big, too small? Great. That's a discussion. I'm not that concerned about, 5% of the people in our focus group said this, and 22% said that. That's too precise for a focus group. I'm looking for, men generally did not like this. Women thought this was too expensive, or whatever it is. And then take that and put that more precisely on a questionnaire. So we're looking for broad themes and sort of concepts, things that happen. Other things you can use in a focus group, sentence completion, where I might say something like, pizza is blank. And go around the room. Give me one or two word answers. Or a word association, varying to that is, I'm going to give you a word, tell me it's the first thing that comes to your mind. Green, what comes to your mind? You're getting emotional gut reactions out of folks. I'm not asking you, tell me what you think about the color green. That's too really hard for people to sort of talk about that, but 1 or 2 words I can probably come up with a gut reaction. So if you use these gut reaction kinds of techniques, are very useful. What you generally want to do though, you generally want to prep your audience and let them know we're not looking for facts. Because I know the facts. If I say something like a word or a phrase, and I'd say, Betty White. Betty White? Who's now 109 or something? Betty White. So Betty White, and you say, oh, she's an actress. I know she's an actress. or she's from so-and-so. Well, I know she's from so-and-so. So if they use facts, you have to kind of stop and go, I'm not looking for factual information, I'm looking for your gut reaction. And based on gut reactions, go around the room. And the moderator should have enough presence of mind to notice body reaction, body language. So if folks are going, you say Betty White, people will give you answers, and yeah, answer's normal, answer's normal. And somebody says something that I notice resonates with the crowd, with the audience, and they have people nodding. I'll stop that person. You know, I noticed that sort of resonated when she said that about Betty White. Well, what about that made you all sort of nod? So you're using that information back to the group to bring out the emotional issues that need to come out. You're not, again, looking to restrict facts, because you can get those later. You're looking for issues that you want to further explore on a questionnaire. So sentence completion or association, great projective techniques. You set the stage, remember, not facts. You're looking for gut reaction, emotional issues, and then manage it that way. So the moderator has a tough job of making sure everybody's on board. Everybody needs to speak. We're going to be an observer watching the situation. And I create a scenario and I have you guys come back toward the end of the focus group and act it out. And then we do what with the audience? Who was right? Who was wrong? What else? What should have been done? What was missed? We're getting the reactions on things. So that's really why you're doing things like role playing. Okay? Have to enjoy the game. Perceptual mapping. That's a technique which could be used not where they believe the answer is. And you mark with demographics so you know who the person is. And then we collect them, and then we have a discussion. I notice none of the women are in this quadrant. Why not? All the men are here. Why? So this helps create a perception of the issue that's very useful for discussion purposes. You can then use this quantitatively on the survey by asking folks on a scale of 1 to 5 to rate these issues, and then you can crosswalk it that way. So perceptual mapping is a great way to get at the difference between what the customer, you think the customer thinks, and what their real perception really is.
What's the best way to record the conversations when you're doing a focus group?
Video and audio tape it.
Right.
And you would tell them.
And you usually have a partner that's also making notes along the way too.
Yes. Now, if you're in a focus
So the
facility,
moderator's focused on the conversation.
yes, the moderator should not, be taking a lot of notes. I might jot down a few things here and there. Like you say something, oh yeah, in the middle of a conversation, I want to get back to it, so I might write a note down, just so I can get back to it. I'm not going, wait a minute, that looks disruptive. So you then generally want to audio, videotape it. It's actually room downstairs, 357, I think. Downstairs, it's a focus group room. And it's got a room and a one-way mirror in the second room and a recording. So you generally record it, and of course you tell them you're recording it. You have to sign waivers. And you're using that to also map the conversation after the fact. It's not just, to have it to give to the client. You want to be able to map the recording. So you can look and say, well, men will kind of said this, or the women, and have a conversation that way. It might be that the client wants the, you might not give, I should say, the recording to the client. The client might not, if it's an employee survey, employees might say, I'm not going to be in it if you're going to give the client the tape, but it might be used simply for your own research purpose. So you have to clarify why you're using it and how it's going to be used in the research. But yes, so generally you would a video and audio, tape it and let folks know. One moderator, you might have your teammates help a little bit, peppering a few questions here and there, or feeding the moderator some questions. If you're moderating, go, there's something he really ought to ask this. Or he really needs to get this person in the focus group quieted down because they won't shut up. Or he missed that, or whatever. You can write some notes and give it to your moderator as kind of a feeder. Now, some cases they use text, right? They'll text the moderator, like the people in the back of the room, the one-way mirror, they're sitting in the back with their sandwiches and beer or whatever, and they're watching the focus group. Drinking. So they're watching the focus group. Yeah, she really needs to ask him this. So you can conceivably text it to her. Now, if you do that, what do you need to make sure you do? If I have my confederate, my teammate, who's behind the one-way mirror, and I'm moderating, I'm missing something. He's like, dag nabbit, he should ask that. He could write a note and run it in. And you let folks know ahead of time that somebody might be coming in and out to give some notes, that's great. If you're texting, that's okay too. It's a little distracting for the members of the focus group, particularly if you don't tell them what you're doing because they're thinking that you're just doing something else. So you need to make it clear that if you are looking at your mobile device, that you're looking at notes that are coming from the back room. Even so, still, it's off-putting, to be honest, to do it that way. So you're generally better off with somebody sending in notes or whatnot as the afternoon or the session progresses. Last couple things, then we'll get into the survey, then we'll wrap up here and take some additional questions. Observation's a great way, because this is what customers actually do. The problem with the other methods, IDIs, focus groups, and even the surveys, you're asking people in many cases what they would do, or even if you ask what they have done, they might not give you a fully straightforward answer. Observation is really there where you're saying what they actually are doing. Yes?
So, about 2 weeks ago, I was part of a focus group for a technology product that's being developed. So they could show us like mock-ups of what they wanted to do. But I don't know, it just felt like they kept asking, how would you use this? Would you use this? And it's like people were saying things,
right?
And they could attach reasons to it. But I think if they actually had the product, I don't think they would necessarily do that. How do you sort through that? I mean, I guess it might not be an easy answer, but how do you approach that?
It's difficult if you're asking people questions about what they would do. You really have to look at that very carefully. Jen, you're going to ask them a lot of screening kinds of questions. Like when you talk about doing things like, reliability, validity tests. If I ask you, when do you want to be an astronaut? And you say yes. Every kid wants to be an astronaut, right? So does NASA go on this big hiring binge? They ask you a series of criterion questions. Well, do you like heights? Do you like training? This many years of training? Well, no. Well, based on this criteria, you're not really going to be an astronaut. Or are you going to vote? Yeah, of course I'm going to vote. Oh, okay. Gallup asks a series of screening questions. Well, did you vote last time? Well, no, I meant to. Did your spouse vote? No. You and who's running? Not sure yet. So all these screening questions. And based on that, they go, this clown says he's going to vote, but he's not going to be elected voter, screen him out. There's usually 2-3% variance. So you can do things like maybe ask them other questions or observe them in perhaps a contrived way where they don't really fully know, when you create a scenario to see how they react. You might get some different data out of it that way, but yes?
Yeah, so I guess they were kind of asking because they were deciding they're building the product, and so there's enormous investment cost. So they wanted to build it with the most useful features. So I guess, given that goal of uncertain technology, and I feel like it's not that people were saying things that they didn't mean. It's just, I don't think it's so hard to, how would I use this product in a social setting while watching TV?
Okay, see this little thing here, this laser pointer?
Yeah.
If I said, well, how do you like all these features on the yes, no, you might be better off not telling them what the company is and have 3 or 4 laser pointers here with the different features.
Okay.
And say, have them rate them that way and tell them what do you like in terms of how it feels, is it, have features on it, would you like to use that, without telling them which one you're really researching. Okay. It might be just a combination. But when you set it up like you're describing, you're going to get a lot of biased answers. People are going to think about what they should be saying. Now, even if it's not to bias it, but just, I want to be helpful. So the overthinking things. So you might be better off having several products and asking them on that basis. They do this often with water bottles or water drink tests like that. Here are different ways of packaging water bottles, for example. Which package is the most efficient? Which is the best? So that might be a way to get around having them give you answers that they're overthinking, because they will do that.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
Yeah, they will do that. And the observations is a little bit dicey, because when you have a natural observation, that's if I just go to Starbucks and watch people. All right? Have you ever done this? Watch people? Have you ever people watched? Come on.
Yes.
Of course you've done it, right? So you're what people watch. So natural is where you're just watching people. Contrived is where you set up a scenario and see how they react. Like the what is it? What would you do? You seen this ABC News, or is it Candid Camera? That kind of thing. So you're creating a scenario to see how they react, and that's useful too. Direct versus indirect. Direct is where I actually observe. Versus indirect is, I think, necessary to observe, but I kind of think I know what they did. So if you see somebody coming out of, coming out of the gap with a bag. And you're outside the front door, whatever, you're saying that. And the question is, did this person buy something at the Gap? You're going to say what? Yes. So you're in the court of law, and what is the, when you're under cross-examination, what are they going to ask you? Did you see it? No? How do you know they actually bought anything there? Well, I don't know. Dismissed, right? So indirect is, well, you have not done first-hand knowledge. Direct, I saw it more first-hand. So indirect versus direct. Structured versus unstructured. is where you might be looking for structures where you're looking for specific behaviors. Unstructured, you're not. So you're down at Starbucks, natural observation, and you're only looking to see how many times how long people are waiting in line, or whether people come in by themselves or with somebody, or whether they buy coffee drinks or food items or whatever. You go with the list of things you're looking for. That's the structure piece. Unstructured is, we're just going to observe customers and see what they do, and based on that, we might decide these are behaviors we need to further examine before we decide how we're going to proceed. Disguised versus undisguised, whether they really know they're being observed versus not. If I know I'm being observed, behavior is often different. If I do not know, then my behavior is going to be somewhat, more natural, what it really would be. So, under what circumstances would you presume you're being observed versus not?
Well, you kind of presume at all times, given the NSA.
Yeah, just as Andrew Merkel. They get any more ridiculous. So if you go into a convenience store, do you presume you're being watched? Or bank? Or if you're walking right here in front of Gelman? If someone would ask you this, are you being observed? You might think, well, maybe now that I think of it, but I bet you probably never thought of it walking around Gelman, from the streets in front of Gelman. I have no idea whether they're observing anything, but there are areas where it doesn't really occur to you, but if you ask, you might say yes. Other areas you really know. You go to the bank, you go to convenience stores, you go to a jewelry store, whatever, you pretty much, it's there. You can see it, very pretty present. So your behavior is somewhat altered based on that. So. And then mechanical observation, which is a more quantitative one, typically, unless you're structured, you're looking for a number of people who come in, that can be, somewhat quantitative. If you go to the ball game, mechanical observation, you go through the turnstiles. Mechanical observation, how many folks come and go? Who has a badge, a card key for their work? You beep in and out. And that's observation, who comes and goes and when. You go to the grocery store and you buy what? Groceries, and do what at the register? Beep, 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 beep. That thing. Perpetual inventory system, it's a form of mechanical observation. We can do inventory control, who bought what, where, and when, pretty quick. It's observational, quantitative, very useful. This is where you can go back and say, well, not only do I understand the voice of the customer, but I have data of what they're actually doing. And in many cases, they might not even be aware they're doing it. So it really is good data in terms of not having the biases. Observation is a useful way of understanding the customer. Qual or quant is sort of your challenge, or which way do you want to go. And again, remember, it's qualitative generally and not random. You can't say it represents a population. You can only say it represents a population if it is a statistically representative survey of a large set of people, essentially. Then I can say, this small group represents a large group. When they do a national survey, who are you going to vote for, A or B? How many people do they survey? How many people are there to be surveyed? 200 million or 250 who are over 18 or whatever the number is? How many people in the U.S. over 18? I don't know what the number is. Let's say 250 million. Make it up. How many folks are they going to ask? Maybe 1,000, maybe fewer, maybe 800, 700. Of course, as the sample size goes down, what happens to error? Generally goes up. But this is the ultimate final piece of understanding the customer, because now you can go back and say, well, we did the qualitative stuff, so we have some idea of what the customer thinks. That's very different from saying we have statistically representative data saying this is what the customer actually thinks writ large. That's a very different argument, and a much more powerful argument to be made. That's done with the survey piece. But it only works if you've done the other stuff first. The secondary data, IDI, focus group, observation, all these things, some combination, building to the final questionnaire, which is a much larger scale set of data. So the final thing I'll wrap up your questionnaire is then how are we on time? Are we over?
No, you're way under. It's 6 p.m. You have time.
At 6 p.m. we have what, till 9?
Until 7.
This is horrifying. Yes. I'll break shortly and take questions and go from there. Last on the survey piece. On the survey piece, which is a bugaboo. Now, all these topics I've been talking about are complex and require a lot more than obviously we have here to go over. What I'm trying to do is give you a hit and run of major topical areas in understanding the voice of the customer. From there, you can dig deeper and look into these methods a little more carefully. But here's kind of where we are now, the survey piece. The survey is the final step in the puzzle. If I ask you a question, okay? If I ask you, you know, if you got a coin, right? Flip a coin. And I ask you, is it going to be heads or tails? You're going to tell me what?
Tails.
Could be heads or tails. Although one time I flipped a nickel and landed on its end. And I was, you gotta be kidding me. So in any event, so let's just ignore that piece and say yes, 50-50, right? Probability. So if I said, well, you can flip a coin 10 times, might you have 10 heads in a row? What if you flip it 3 times? Might you have 3 heads in a row?
Yes.
Now, as I go up, you guys get a little more grimacing going on in terms of whether you would trust this in a row argument. 3 in a row, maybe. 5, 10. Again, 10 heads in a row on a fair coin. How about 100? No. So if you flip a coin 100 times, what would you expect the distribution to be? Roughly 50-50. You might get 55-45 is generally, statistically speaking, about the biggest spread you would get. So basically, you have a margin, with 100 flips, you have basically a margin of about 5 either way. So you might get 45-55. What if you got 30-70? You would presume what? Something's wrong with the coin. It's not a fair coin. So when you talk about doing survey work, they assume that there's normality in the data. Remember the central tendency theory? Remember that? Deal? As data sets get larger, there's normality in the data. Well, then we can predict the survey will work. So if you flip a coin 100 times, you expect what again? Right, 50-50? So if I said, what? 150-50? Well, what if you flip it 1,000 times? It gets closer to 50-50. How about 10,000? Even closer, but at 1,000, it's going to get to probably 52-48, pretty darn close. Maybe even closer than that, 51-49. So if 1,000 is 51-49, do I really need to flip it 10,000 times? I mean, 51-49, that's within a reasonable margin of error, right? So 1,000 flips is enough to tell you what it would be like if you were to flip it 100,000 times, or it's not going to change, not much, not enough. In order to get, in the survey world, in order to get rid of that error, you have to go to census. You have to ask everybody, and then you get rid of the error, but that's almost impossible to do. So survey work works because the math of it works, the statistics of it work. So if you can make that argument that we have a survey of a reasonably large number of folks, if you're interested in doing any survey work, and you want to talk about sampling, and how to come up with a sample size that's defendable, you drop me an email and we can talk about that, how to calculate. We had 809 people. And we can show that with this error rate, and this confidence interval, and this variance, got a number, just like the networks news people do it. So drop me an email, and I can certainly help you. There are multiple formulas for calculating sample size. I can help you with that. But the reason this is important is because when you can say that 65% of the customers in this region want a pizza parlor, then you're saying that not just 65% of our sample, that statistically 65% of everybody in our market area wants it, and that's significant. You said we have a lot of data to talk about when we talk about the customer. So, just as this is kind of a summary slide for hit and run purposes here. The different levels of data, do you know about this? When you ask customers information, you need to have varying levels of data. Nominal, ordinal, interval ratio. There's a lot of levels of data you need to know. Obviously, the higher up you go, nominal is the lowest level data. Ratio is the most sophisticated. Here are your characteristics. Nominal is only descriptive. Doctor, dentist, lawyer. Ordinal has an order to it. Interval, you can understand the distance between the order, and ratio is a numeric. So let's do a quick example. We've got, here we go. This is what level data? Pepsi? Nominal. Why? Because it's only descriptive. So it's the low level data. So if you have a survey, or you're asking people in questionnaire or IDIs or focus groups, and all you ask are low-level nominal data questions, you're going to get low-level analysis. It's not going to tell you a lot about your life. It'll tell you some, of course, but it's going to limit what you can do from the analysis perspective. So this is nominal data. How about these two together? What level data is this? Am I going to pour it on myself?
Because you choose one or the other.
Well, I would say here's Pepsi or Mist in this. If I say Pepsi missed, does that make sense? You understand what I'm talking about, right? The script. What if I said missed Pepsi? Does that make less sense or equivalent sense? Why? Because they're each nominal data, they're standalone descriptive data. There's no natural order to it. Now, if I were to say put them in order of preference, oh, like Pepsi, then missed. Then we have higher level knowledge about the data because now it gives you order to it. That tells us something else about the data other than what they are. And that's significant. Now I have some idea of how they relate to each other. That's a higher level of information. How about if I tell you, might I make this interval level data? Like Pepsi, sorry?
How much more do you like Pepsi?
How much more? So if I say, oh, well, like Pepsi and then miss. That's ordinal. That's an order. If I ask interval, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you like Pepsi? 1 to 10. Now, oh, Pepsi's a 9. And this is what? This could be a 2, which tells you what?
Big difference.
The order is Pepsi, it's missed, but there's actually really a difference in how you like it, which you don't only get when they put them in order. Yes?
So, I guess whenever you have people go and take like an opinion into trying to quantify their opinion into a number like that, I imagine there's a large number of biases that come in. His 9 could be different. His 9 could be equivalent to my 7.
Right.
I think there's also probably a tendency if you rank something as 7 and you compare it to that. I guess just
good question. We have a lot of scaling issues, and there's a whole, people have food fights over scaling questions. Okay, whether it's an odd versus even scale, 1 to 5, 1 to 4, 1 to 6, 1 to 10, whatever. Generally, it's not, I mean, there's not one that's right or wrong. There just is an impact of picking one versus the other. That's what it's really about. So if I talk about, this is why doing the preliminary stuff is important. And focus group and IDI stuff. You know something about your audience. If I poll you guys, and I've already done some IDI and focus group work, and I know that you guys, my audience, their opinions are not that different. When we focus group them and talk to them, yeah, they were differences, but they were not all over the map in terms of the differences. So that tells me I probably want a tight scale, maybe 1 to 4. What if these clowns are all over the map? Wide range of opinions. I probably want a bigger scale to capture that gradation of opinion. So one of the challenges with doing quantitative work is we're taking people who are qualitative in nature and we're cramming you into quantitative scales. So there's going to be error. You can't get around that. But the more you know about your audience, the better chance that your scales can reflect their opinions. Now you could even do something like, if you had a large enough scale survey, you could do mix them. You could have if you have 1,000 people and you have a scale that's 1 to 5, and you have another scale from 1 to 7 on the same exact question, 500 get each randomly, and then you correlate the answers. And if there's not much of a difference, your argument is there's not a big difference in the scale. So if someone were to go, I think your scaling is screwed up. I was thinking you might say that. That's why I had another chunk of folks have a different scale on the same exact question. And I correlated the answers, and they were very similar. There was no statistically significant difference. Therefore, the scale did not have an impact on their answers. So you can remove that as an issue. So there's a lot of work that we've done in the scaling piece to sort of simplify and clarify that. But generally, I would be consistent in the scales because you don't want to compare 1 to 5 to 6 to 7 unless you're doing that correlation analysis. So we've got ordinal scale, put them in order 1 to 2. It's called the comparative scale because how I put one depends on what's on the list, so I compare what's on the list. The interval scale, put them on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 10, is a non-comparative scale because I get to rate each one by itself, so to speak. That gives me a lot more information. So it's a much higher level of sophistication. And ratio is the numeric version. In other words, in this example, it probably would work because there's really not really numbers unless you set on from 0 to 1. The 0 ratio means 0 is meaningful. So on 0 to 1, I would give this an 87, and I'd give this a 4. And that gives you even much more comparative level data. So the takeaway here is the higher level data you ask, the better decision making you can have. Now, lastly on this piece, how many of you have gone to these movies when the trailers weren't what you thought, but you go to the movie anyway, and you go during the break or before the movie starts or whatnot to go get some what?
Popcorn.
Perhaps some popcorn. So you toddle on up to the counter, and you've got some kid there behind the counter, and you ask them about popcorn. You don't see the popcorn. I don't see it. So you have a question for this person behind the counter. And what's the question?
Where's the popcorn?
You want popcorn. What's your question?
Where can I get some popcorn?
Or you say what?
Where can I get some popcorn?
Yeah, or do you have something like that? What level question is that? Do you have popcorn? What level question is that? Nominal, right? It's just a basic yes or no. That's all. There's nothing really. It's yes or no. Now what? So you say yes. The guy behind the counter says yes. I have popcorn. So is that enough? Is that high enough level data to make a decision about buying popcorn?
No.
Let's say you don't care about the price. You're interested in how big it is. It's not? Because what if I say you're behind the counter and I say, yes, I'll take popcorn? You're going to tell me what? You're going to ask me what?
What size?
Yeah, you're gonna want higher level data without even knowing it. So we're actually working up this chain without really even knowing it. So the guy behind the counter, well, what size do you want? Okay. Oh, okay. Well, small, we have small, medium, and large. And what level data is that? Ordinal. Now, that might be high enough data for someone to go, all right, based on that, I'll go with medium. Because if I go with medium, I figure I've got the highest % chance of being the least wrong. So we'll go with medium. But if it's something like we've got child, we've got junior, we've got regular, adult, jumbo, super jumbo, and gigantic. Look at these ridiculous sizes they have. Or you Starbucks, they have what? Tall, grande, and venti. What is that? So if I gave these crazy sizes, that's ordinal level data, right? But you might not be able to make a decision on that either. You're going to say what? You're going to say, what's the difference? You're asking for basically interval level data. So, actually, if you look over there, you'll see the little tubs taped. You know how they tape them? And you can see the 5 sizes there. That's more interval level data because now I'll understand the relationship size. Oh, based on that, I'll take the second one from the left. Higher level data enables you to make a decision there. Now, that still might not be enough. You might actually want ratio data related to the size. So your final size question might be what? Numeric data about the size. How many ounces? How many kernels? How many ounces? So if I tell you it's 12 ounces, 16, 24, whatever, 312, whatever it's 8 ounces. Based on the ounces, I really cannot ask any more questions related to size. That's it. And I will provide some other things. So even in that absurd little example, something as simple as buying popcorn, you are in fact working up the chain to get higher level data to make that basic decision. When you're talking about complex business decisions, when you start asking higher level data, you can make much better decisions. Much better decisions on the level of data you've got. So make sure when you're asking questions to not, even in the focus groups, to try to ask, in the focus groups you can ask a lot of ordinal questions, try to get differences, not just yes or no's or basic questions. So, all right, so the survey piece, and then lastly, you can look at your, I'm not going to go through these, but you can read these. I've provided a list of questions, scale types, a bunch in here, that you can look at. You've got the whole issue of comparative versus non-comparative questions. Odd versus even, whether I should have an odd scale versus even. Again, generally here, if I know my audience, if I'm picking something where I know, folks, this is controversial, I might go, I don't want to give them an even scale. I want to force them. Or it might be that, this is an issue that, gosh, I really think that when we focus group, there's a lot of neutral opinions on it. So maybe we let them have that middle spot. So it really depends on what you know about the audience. That's the key driver. It's not just, I want this is odd versus even. Again, you could ask multiple sets of folks compare scales if you're concerned about that. If your client is going to say, well, I don't like your scaling. Well, we actually asked another 500 same questions, different scales, there's no difference. That gives you a lot of ammunition. You've anticipated that. So that becomes very, very, very good. Well, we did one for this project I did for FEMA. We had 200,000 records. And yes?
I guess I'm just curious how you go about, if you have two different things, particularly if you have the force versus non-force scale.
Yes.
I'm curious, I guess, from a data analysis point of view, how can you determine those two are equivalent?
If you have like 1,000 folks, let's set down an example. You got 1,000 people. And the question is, satisfied or unsatisfied on X, Y, Z, 1 to 5 or 1 to 6, say. So if you've got, let's do 1 to 4 and 5 here. So if you've got the same exact question, two different groups of folks, 1 to 5, 1 to 4, you're obviously not going to correlate these because they're different. You could, but they're different scale lengths. You might not want to do that. I would look at and go, well, what percent said 3? How does that compare to the percentages that split here? Look at that as a measure. If you had a lot more that were here than here, then I might presume this number is maybe odd scale is probably not the right scale to have. So the ways you can look at it, again, it's not exact. I mean, the numbers are exact, but you're ultimately getting opinions about folks, which is not entirely exact. So you could look at that. If you've got a survey and 85% gave you neutral, that's not really, you might think it's not that helpful if you have to make a decision. So if it's something that we've got to make a decision on this one or the other, that's another driver. We've got to force them off the scale. We want to find out, this 85% here, where do they fall? Now, we might even give them a little more room, maybe 1 to 6. Okay, and see if the 3 and 4s are equally split among this three. So if we have a 6-point scale, I would look at the 3s and 4s. Maybe this combined is 85%. And what if it's half and half, 42 and 42 or whatever? Then I'll presume it doesn't matter. So we'll look at that way. So there's a lot of work in scaling that's done. But it's not, again, it's an exact science, if that makes any sense. Okay. So, last thing, just some things to avoid in questionnaires, and also to avoid in your interviews or focus groups. Avoid, like assumptions. Don't put acronyms, or do you agree with Mr. Jones's policy, blah blah blah. Who's Mr. Jones? Now, if it's a focus group or interview, they might. I don't know who you're talking about. But if it's a survey and you've got a certain percent who don't know that or don't recognize the acronym, when you talk about a policy shift or you talk about a competitor for your product and they don't know who you're talking about, they're still probably going to answer. And you don't know that they're giving the answers incorrect. So be careful about assumptions, assuming more about your audience than they would really know. Confusing meaning. Be careful of confusing meanings. If I said, where did you get your allergy shot? What's your answer? Pharmacy? Or my right arm? You've seen the T-shirt that says commas save lives? You've seen this T-shirt? It's funny. 3 words. Enjoy the end. Thank you. Oh yeah. Email me anytime. It says, let's eat grandma. And the other one says, let's eat, grandma. To be very careful, about the syntax and how things are written, you can have some areas that are very, very unclear, particularly if you do any kind of surveys across languages or cultures, then could be a real issue. Guessing questions, asking people what they would do. Be careful about asking, even your IDIs. Or focus groups, asking people a lot of forward questions, or what they would do, problematic. You generally want to stick to questions about what have you done. So asking the woulda, coulda, shoulda questions are not as good as asking what you did do. Are you going to read Consumer Reports the next time you buy a dishwasher? Or do some research? Yes, of course I'm going to need it. The last time you bought a dishwasher, did you read Consumer Reports? Well, I meant to, I didn't get around to it. So asking people historically what they did is often better than asking them what they would, could, or should do. Be careful about that. Should not never do it. Just be careful. It's going to be the kind of guessing arena. Yes.
Yeah, I guess you just said it. You should not never do it, because what if it's a brand new product where you're trying to interview your customer?
Yes.
And see how he does things currently.
Yes.
And how he would like to.
Right.
He would like to do these things if they had the opportunity to do the service.
Yes. So I think these kinds of questions, the woulda, coulda, shoulda, if you ask them, just make sure that you're couching that into this is kind of their perception, saying what they would do, not as this is what's happened. So just the way you look at it is critical. But yeah, I would not ever ask them. But be careful. Make sure you know what you're getting. Don't presume this is factual, that they've done this. Or, if 29% said they're going to do this, then you're going to say, hey, 29% aren't going to do this. What have they done in the past? You looked at that too? So be careful, I guess, and look at it appropriately. Double-barreled, asking 2 questions at once. At the restaurant, was the service fast and courteous? Very fast, but he bit my head off. So how do we answer that question? So be careful putting 2 questions at once. Overstating the condition, this is very done, very enjoyable, and very good in politics, very common in politics. Done from both parties, that they say, well, based on the current political state and issues with the healthcare debate, overstating the impact of it, pro and con, and then polling you on it. And it's really not entirely fair or honest in how they do this. Be careful about it. Might be done unintentionally where you're creating a scenario that might be overwritten in a way, or maybe leading in some way. Be careful. Even leading like questions like you see very common. How satisfied were you with the service at the restaurant? Well, that presumes some level of satisfaction. As opposed to how satisfied or unsatisfied were you with the service at the restaurant? Then that is clearly more balanced. Or please rate the service at the restaurant in the scale of satisfied, unsatisfied. But be careful, the questions themselves can be leading. If you're presenting the voice of the customer data to a client or to a lender, they're going to call you on this stuff if you're making claims. Because remember, the survey piece is your argument about what is going to happen with the whole population, and that's going to require some defending. And then I think that was it. Internet, of course. Internet's great, but be careful about some diversion control issues. Be careful about PII, personally identifiable information. Be careful of that kind of work. We did one, actually, one of our groups did one on the whole issue was about gender differences in on-campus eateries. The men and women go to different types of eateries. They had a million versions, of course, and then back and forth. And then the one that went out, that was the version that did not have gender listed on the questionnaire.
Oh, no.
So I'm like, they already had like 200 and something responses. And they're like, where's gender? It was in the version that somebody meant to send, they didn't. So version control is a big issue. But it's great for complex questionnaires. It's great for reaching folks who are far across lines. So online is great to do. When you talk about the sampling piece, that's the big bugaboo with internet, getting a good representative sample. We still have some issues with that. When we talk about the sampling piece, takeaway on that, I'll finish on this piece. When you go after folks, are we going after them random or non-random? Those are two big issues. Am I going to select people randomly, or am I going to select them, which is probability sampling? Everybody has a calculatable chance of being selected, like the lottery or like random digit dial that the telephone, that the news stations do when they do national surveys. All that's random. Non-probability, non-random, more judgmental. I'll stop whoever I think will be good for the survey. I'll stand in front of Margaret Center, stop everybody, things like that. Non-probability. So you need to be able to defend, talk about your customer, and you're allegedly that you know what they're thinking. You understand their voice, so to speak. How did you get them? How did you get them? Be very careful on that. Final question, and we'll take general.
I might have missed it. What is a good representative sample size then for such an in-depth, because this is a time-consuming. We're talking about an hour. We're talking about 2 individuals. A lot of startup companies have limited resources.
The sample size for a survey. It depends on generally. If you want to send me an email, I'll help you calculate that. Sure. And my email's right here. But generally speaking, when we're talking about survey, when we're talking about sampling, okay, N is the number of people who answer a survey. 812 respondents, whatever. You see this on the news. There are generally 3 variables that go into calculating that N. Error rate, confidence interval, and variance estimation. Those are generally your 3 variables that go into calculating. Now, there's a difference between calculating a sample for a large population and a small population. If I only have 1,000 customers, that's a different formula. It still involves the same 3 components, and I can walk anybody through that you would like. So the size of the sample is a function of the variance of the population, not the size of the population. People get that wrong. So, for example, if I want to go to a movie, back to our movies, I guess I'm in a movie mode, right? And I want to go to a movie, and I don't know if I should go to the movie. What do you tend to do after you've read about it? What might be your next step? You've read about it, which is what kind of research? Secondary. And now you want to do some primary research, so you do what? IDIs, you interview people, not lengthy, but you interview, not depth. We talk to them. I doubt you're going to focus group it, but you're going to talk about it with your friends. And you're going to select 3 friends. Now let's presume these are friends you trust their opinion. In other words, it's a good sample. So I ask you, did you like the movie? And you tell me,
No.
no. Did you like the movie? Yes. You tell me, did you like the movie? Yes. So now what are you going to do? You're going to go to the movie? What happens if you ask one more person And you say, he says yes. How many yeses do we have?
3.
Okay, I'll probably go. What if you say no? Now I'm probably thinking, I have 2 no's, 2 yeses. Now what? You're going to start doing what?
Who do I trust more?
Asking more friends to try to come up with a pattern. If I said, love movie, love it, I'll probably go. Love it, hate it is okay, I'm going to ask more friends. So nowhere in that scenario is the number of friends relevant. What's relevant is the variance of their answers. That's what you're trying to establish a pattern. If you're trying to find that pattern that's predictable. If I ask enough friends that I can tell you, I'm going to get 3 yeses for every no. Is that's enough? And that's good enough, I'll go to the movie. So if you want some help on a sample size and defending that, drop me a note, because there's a formula, multiple formulas behind that. Take some questions before we break. I know I kind of went maybe a bit longer than I was supposed to. I was waiting for the play-out music, but I didn't hear it. Yes.
Like, are there certain resources